والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا وطبيب ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
مؤمنين مؤمنات brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Sorry, brother, sister. There's babies and kids are running out on the streets. Parents, please keep your eyes on those kids that are running around and throwing rocks in here and there. Please, I can just announce to be respectful to the neighbors and your kids as well. Parents, it's your responsibility to keep your eyes on your children. They're out on the streets running around and it's dark outside. Please, Salli ala Muhammad wa ala.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
On the first night, we discussed the different ways that a Shia expresses their love for Ahlul Bayt, specifically the Imam Hussein alayhi salam, through Aza and Azadari. We talked about the different manifestations, internally, externally, how some people, like poetry, some people are involved in social justice, some people want to go and fight oppressors. There's different ways. And then we went a bit deeper into the conversation about, well, what actually makes up our identity, specifically as Shias. And we said that sometimes when we're faced with all these issues in society, we don't really know how to think. We don't know how to respond, we don't know what to say, and our belief system is weak. So then our actions become weak too. And we said that there's multiple factors for why we've been having this identity crisis for so long. We talked about how it starts with the family, right? It starts with the parents, with tarbiyah. When the tarbiyah, the Islamic parenting is done well, then the children become strong in their aqidah and their iman. When there's some lapses and some deficiencies there, then you see that later on these kids become very confused, and even adults, we become very confused and we're not able to answer simple questions. And that starts leading to a weak type of practice in our mind. We also said that the education that we are receiving is also going to weaken our faith possibly, and weaken our identity. If the main source of our education is coming from an outside force, like a public school, like a Western public school, and the main criteria over here, the main idea is democracy, capitalism, secularism, individualism, liberalism, then these ideas, generally speaking, are antithetical to Islam. And this is also going to cause an issue for Muslims because they don't know how to respond. They don't know what they're saying. And now, increasingly in society, we see that atheism is the norm now. Religiosity, believing in religion, believing in metaphysics, immaterial things is seen as something ridiculous, as a joke. So we're in the minority there. And then we said as Muslims, we're in the minority too, because we're not Jews or Christians. And then within Muslims, we're also the minority because we're Shias. And then within Shias, we're the minority because if you're practicing Shia, you're also the minority. Because most people who are a part of a religion, they don't practice. Now again, I was looking at statistics today about this, and they say 22 to 30% of Muslims, they just end up leaving Islam very quickly. Once in America specifically. And again, when we are looking back at the variables here, again, issues in the home, and kind of a issue in parenting, we're talking about a lack of proper Islamic education, and then hearing information from the media, then of course we expect somebody comes to them and says, why would you believe in this sky fairy, some make-believe God? There's all this pain and punishment and torture in the world. How could you believe in a just God? You don't have any evidence for what you believe. So obviously any person would be confused and they'd say, what's the point of a religion like this? It doesn't make sense. So what we decided to do then is say, okay, let's see and let's try to re-examine some of these ideas. And let's see if we can strengthen our iman a little bit. Let me give a few hadith. One was from Ali alayhi salam, where he says that the strongest, the best type of iman is when you have strong yaqeen. And a lot of times the reason we don't have good actions in our iman is because we don't know what we're doing. And if you know, remember last night we gave this analogy that even in pop culture, you see people in movies and music and movies and media and TV shows, even in comic books, they have these things like identity crises as well. So we gave the example of Superman, right? Of being raised as Clark Kent and trying to become Superman later on in his life to establish his real identity. But he needed to go through some certain steps there. He didn't understand who he was younger, and all those same forces, again, how he was raised, his friend circle, his education, everything was affecting him and making him more human than superhero, right? But then once he embraced his real identity, then he went beyond. And then he was proud of that. So we are looking for something similar too. If we have pride and iftikhar in who we are, then we'll have no problem being different than everybody else. But most of the time, because our questions are not answered, because everybody else, they're able to answer these questions easily. They can tell you why they believe in, for example, LGBTQ rights. They can give you their answers. And we can't answer it very well. Or they can answer why they believe that they are pro-choice, right, pro-abortion. And we say that if you believe that you're pro-life, then we have a tough response. We don't know how to respond. The only responses that religious people give is, well, God said so. That's what my religion says. I don't know. And that's not sufficient anymore. So we have to try to figure out, are there ways where we can strengthen our iman using the language that's used in this kind of society, which primarily is a rational and logical language. So that's what we want to start to do tonight, is examine some of these questions, starting with Tawheed, the belief in God, to see if it is actually rational and logical and reasonable to believe that God exists. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
And also, we also gave this open invitation last night. A few of you had come and mentioned some of the topics that you'd like addressed. So inshallah, we'll try to set aside some time within this next week of Majalis to address some of those issues. We won't be able to get to everything, so I apologize if we can't hit all of the issues, but we'll try our best. Someone else had also suggested too that after we go through, let's say, our discussion every night, then maybe for 5-10 minutes or so, however, depending on how much time we have each night, I have no problem. I can open the floor up for just general Q&A, right? Especially if it's related to the topic, to make sure everything's clear, everything's clarified. And then after that's done, then we'll move on to the maqtad and the musibah. And then, as Ali was saying too, is we can have a separate Q&A for, let's say, a certain age range, or for sisters only. Although you didn't tell me it was going to be 4 in the afternoon on Saturday and Sunday. We'll talk about. But we can have something. Ideally, I think it would be either before or after the event here. I think that would make more sense. Or we can even have what we've done in other centers as well, is on one of the nights. Maybe not obviously 9 or 10. We can't do those nights. But maybe a night before that is just dedicate the whole night instead of a speech, just to open Q&A for whatever questions might come to your mind. So maybe we can do something like that as well. Okay, so let's start with our first discussion. Again, if you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
And most of you, if you've been born and raised here, or even if you've been living here for a while, I'm sure you've come across people in school, at work, maybe even some of your family members, who have come to you and expressed their doubts and their shak in some aspect of Islam. And sometimes it may get to the point where they say, look, I don't even know if God exists. I don't even know if I believe in Him. And if you ask the average Muslim, actually not even Muslim, you ask the average person who believes in God, they can't really explain why they believe in God. Many of them will give emotional reasons, or personal reasons, or subjective reasons, right? They'll say that, my mother had this disease, we prayed to God, and she became cured. And so that's why I believe that God exists. And then somebody can respond, say, okay, that's fine for you, but I can't prove that to anybody else. Because somebody else can come along and say, well, I prayed to God as well, and my parent died, or I didn't get healed. So that's not a proof, is it? That's emotional, subjective. That's good for you, it's not good for me though. Or they can say, look, well, they prayed to Jesus, somebody else prayed to Allah, This person prayed to, I don't know, Shaitan, but what if they get what they want just from praying? We have to say that whoever you pray to, if you get what you want, that automatically means that that thing exists? Right? Some atheists even make a joke about it. Like, yeah, I prayed to a gallon of milk and my dreams came true. So does that mean the gallon of milk, I should worship it? I mean, some of the points they raise they're legitimate, right? They're not all ridiculous. It's ridiculous. The way that we understand God is important. Now look, I'm not saying it's wrong to believe in God for a personal reason. There's nothing wrong with it. To have a personal, deep, emotional connection with God. In fact, I don't say that's the best you can get. But not everybody gets that. In history, throughout all of time, believing in God, I mean capital G, one God, in monotheism, or multiple gods, has always been the norm in every society. Right? Society has always had some sort of religious belief, whether they were polytheists or then eventually monotheists. So religion, believing in God, and something beyond human beings was always the norm. And then slowly over time, doubt started to creep in, certain questions couldn't be answered, certain philosophical ideas started to get formed. And then, I mean, I'm fast forwarding to a lot of human history here. I don't want to go through a full kind of lesson. But we've come to a point where now people are saying, look, they make the claim that there's zero evidence whatsoever. There's no scientific and no rational evidence that God exists. And since the only way you can prove whether something is true or false is through science or through reason, and since you guys can't do that for God, then there's no reason to believe in Him. What's the point? I mean, that is the very definition of something being logical or rational. It's something that doesn't rely on emotions. Again, I can feel God in my heart, that's fine, but if somebody else doesn't, what good is that? That's not a proof, necessarily, right? It might be good for me, but I can't use that for somebody else. I can't say, I feel something in my heart. That's not good enough. Especially in a society where being godly, worshiping God, is not the norm. Like I said, among Muslims, more and more are leaving Islam. Even among people who still ascribe to Islam, they have their own sort of version of what Islam means. They don't really take rules and regulations from the Quran or Hadith. They say, look, whatever makes sense to me, I'll do that. Let me say the spiritual version of religion, basically. Right? I'll just do what I want. God gave me, they say, God gave me an aql. He gave me an intellect. I can think for myself. I don't need some person halfway across the world to tell me what to do. I can figure stuff out. Or they say religion's outdated. And when people try to respond to these, it's very tough to do so. Because a lot of us, from where we've come from, overseas, right? Whatever country it is, Islamic nations, civilizations, over there, because religiosity, believing in God was the normal thing to do, nobody had to prove to each other that God existed. It didn't matter. Just like over here, if you ask any American to prove to you why democracy is the best form of government, or why capitalism is the best economic system, most Americans would laugh like, what do you mean? It's obvious that it's the best. Because that's the way of living over here, in a democratic system and a capitalistic system. And by default, they're like, yeah, communism is a joke, or socialism is a joke, or a theocracy is a joke, or whatever. Right? That's because that's what we're living in here. In a religious society, it's the same thing. They're like, what do you mean, atheism? They'll laugh at that. That doesn't make any sense. But we see that over time, this movement has grown, even in Islamic countries, because some of those questions have not been answered. Now, when somebody comes and they say, I want you to prove to me that God exists, like, give me your proof. This word proof, or another word used sometimes is give me evidence. Show me that God exists, right? They'll usually say either scientific evidence or rational, logical evidence. Like, show me that. We need to understand first why this is the way that people are asking this question. This was not the normal way people were proving things. Let me give an example if you can recite salawat ala Muhammad wa Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
For those of you who have, let's say, you've grown up in a two-family household, right? So, if like me, if you grew up, there was a mother and a father, right? There's a male figure and a female figure. And you were taught to call them mama, baba, mom, dad, whatever. Just from everything around us, basic intuition, like, okay, this is my mother, this is my father, right, that's it. Have any of you ever seen DNA evidence that they're definitely your parents? Most of us, I'm sure, haven't done that, right? Unless you've been on like Maury or something like that, you had to get a test done. Most of us haven't asked for that. We're just assuming intuitively that, yeah, these are my parents. I don't think that they're going to lie to me. So we're just assuming that. Nobody's given us any scientific proof necessarily, or any rational proof. And we never needed it, we just went on with our lives. Or right now, we have all these water bottles sitting on the table, right? Did anybody stop as they're grabbing these bottles and say, you know what, maybe this is actually not water. Maybe this is some other, like clear liquid that has been poisoned with some chemicals and they're all trying to kill us or something. Does that cross your mind? No. But do you have any actual rational or scientific evidence that it's water? No, you don't. Right now, I'm sure most of you believe that you're awake, right? You're awake, you're not dreaming, right? I mean, this is a dream, it's probably a nightmare. I don't know which person in their dreams are sitting down in front of a lecture, right? It's probably a nightmare. Yeah, most of you believe you're awake right now. Do you have any evidence for it? I mean, you can run into a wall to wake yourself up and test it out. But anytime you're in your world, in your daily routine, you don't stop and think, okay, do I have scientific, rational evidence that I'm awake right now? No, you just go with the flow. For nearly every aspect of our lives, everything that has meaning, we don't demand scientific and rational evidence. We just go with the flow, what makes sense. We use all the variables at our fingertips, and that's how we act. And that's why I said it's important to understand that throughout history, believing in God was intuitive. As we say in Arabic, it's fitri. It was in our nature. It's in every human's nature. But over time, it's been changed, and doubts have been created, and they haven't been answered. That's why now it's become more normal or normalized to not believe in God anymore. And that's why all these other issues that are happening now too, right? So for example, for however many years, it was what? Male and female. And now all of a sudden, we don't think that's true either now. Now there's a whole spectrum. Maybe there's nothing. Or, you know what, maybe you were born in a human body, but you can identify as a dog if you want to. Right? It's unfortunate. Teachers now, in many states, if one of their children in their class tells their teacher that I identify as an animal, like a cat or a dog, the teacher has to say, they have to treat him like an animal. This is how crazy our society has become. You can believe whatever you want and do whatever you want. And it's funny, they don't have any rational evidence for that. They don't have any scientific evidence. What's their thing? That's what I believe to be true. So you see, it's interesting. When it comes to God and religion, they say, bring me science, bring me rationality. But for nearly every other thing that we're dealing with in life, nobody bothers and asks that question. Now, that's not to say that we don't have the evidence. We clearly do. And inshallah, we'll go through those proofs. But it's more about this. When somebody is trying to bring you down to their level, you say, hold on, why do I have to speak in your broken language? Why do I have to speak in the language of science or rationality when nobody else uses that language? Why do I have to come down to your level? The rest of the world is believing in this just fine. If you have a doubt, then you go figure it out. You don't have to put me into question. I can believe in God, in my heart, in my nature, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. So we don't have to be ashamed or feel anxious or stressed out if we don't have all these rational arguments against atheists. Throughout history, the ones who have had these arguments, who have known the proofs, have all been the philosophers. They're the ones who have been going kind of toe-to-toe with other philosophers. It's never been something that the average Christian, the average Jew, the average Muslim, they've never been taught these kinds of proofs. It was never normal for them to do. Just like right now, if I ask you, for example, for those of you who, for example, let's say you're a muqallid of Sayyid Sistani, hafidhahullah. You're in his taqleed. So, for example, Sayyid Sistani believes that chess is haram. If I ask any of you to give me the proof that chess is haram, you don't know it. I don't need to know it because I do taqleed, right? I believe he's the most knowledgeable. He's the most knowledgeable of marja'. I do taqleed. I follow him in the rules. He says it's haram, so I follow. And just about everybody else who does taqleed, same thing. They believe he's knowledgeable, so I follow it. And you go to your doctors, and they give you a prescription. If you trust them, you follow that too. Although, again, I put a little shock in the CDC and FDA last night, but that's a different conversation altogether. But the same thing, it's normal for people to just refer to authority and say, look, I don't know the proofs. You can go ask the people who study it. Why are you asking me? Why are you bothering me? But you see, it's funny, Bill Maher, those of you who know who he is, right? This pundit, political pundit. He made this movie a while back, a documentary called Religious, where he would go around on the streets and question people who were religious, right? Christians, Jews, Muslims, etc. And he would ask them basic questions, and if any of you saw the movie, they gave terrible answers. And the whole idea is, he said, ah ha ha ha, you dumb religious people, you don't know what you're talking about. We say, look, would you do this to anybody else? In any other field, do you go to somebody who, let's say, only studied it in high school maybe, or maybe has a bachelor's, do you go and ask them all these questions? No, nobody does that. We never ask these deeper types of questions, because it's unnecessary. Yes. Do we have the ability to answer them? Yeah, we do. Maybe in this society, because of the growing sort of epidemic of doubt in our communities and the growing trend of atheism, do we need to start learning these things? Probably. Or at least some of us need to start learning these things. And that's why, inshallah, tonight we're going to continue and go through some of these proofs, inshallah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
So again, summarizing the first point. Yes, there are proofs, rational, logical proofs of God's existence. Definitely, we will start that. But it doesn't mean you definitely need them. And you shouldn't feel cornered if somebody says, oh, you don't have it, there's no God. No, that's not how it works. Because we know there are other ways, human, intuitive ways of proving things that we all use in our lives. In the same way we said, that same person down the street saying, oh, I'm a cat, or whatever, identify as something else. You're intuitive, well, we can be intuitively believing in God too. That should be okay. Now, before we get into the rational proof, we have to do one more thing. This idea of scientific proof. When we start talking about the idea of proving things or giving reasons for things in religion, and when we start, we have this sort of dichotomy or this battle sometimes, religion and science, religion and science. Religion and science are always butting heads. How do religion and science work together? The reason why people, I think, they think like that is because they have no idea what religion is and they have no idea what science is. If we had a clear idea of what religion is and what science is, we know that it doesn't even make sense to say that they clash. When people, for example, say this phrase, scientific proof or scientific fact, that is one of the clearest pieces of evidence that they don't know what science is. Science is not in the business of truth. Let me say that again. Science does not offer truth. 100% truth. It will never ever give you certainty in anything. What science is basically just an experiment and fancy guesswork. That's all it is. I mean, we use it and it's good, I'm not denying that. But we have to understand it for what it is. They say this is something you study in epistemology, right? The theory of knowledge. Okay. So for example, let's say I had a quarter in my hand. I flick it, I get heads. So, okay, first time heads. Flick it again, heads. 2 out of 2 heads. I keep doing it, let's say 100 times. Every time, it comes up heads. So before I do it for the 101st time, what do you think it's going to come up as? So scientifically, the idea is, it should probably come up as heads. Is that absolutely certain? No, but it's based on previous observations. That's all that science is. You take observations, you measure things, and you make your best guess and estimate. That's all it is. Science does not give you 100% fact. It never has. And that's why science is constantly changing. Because they know this. Anybody who really knows how science works, truly, they know that, yes, things will change. One day we'll think that the Earth is the center of the universe. Then the next day, the sun will be the center of the universe. And you know what? Guess what? There's a bunch of other universes. And beyond that, there's going to be a multiverse, right? So it's going to keep going on and on. Is it the Big Bang theory? Are we talking about string theory? Theory? Do we go with classic Newtonian general theory of relativity from Einstein, or special relativity theory? Or now we're in the quantum world. Science is constantly updating itself, but it's never actually giving you full truth. It's basically taking in variables, new variables every single day, and say, look, we got a clearer picture now, a clearer picture, but never the full picture. It's like this. Let me give you an analogy. Let's say we're all working on a puzzle together. Normally when you buy a puzzle, you've got the box, right? So on the cover, you can see what it's supposed to look like, and then that's how you start putting the puzzle pieces together. Let's say somebody just dumps all these puzzle pieces, but we don't have the cover, we don't have the box. So we have no idea what it's supposed to look like. So the only way to figure it out is what? To start taking pieces and trying. Right? That's experimentation. You take a piece, you take a piece. Let's say you put a few things together, like, oh, I think this is going to be, I don't know, looks like a house. Then you put some more together, like, oh, it's actually a city. Then you put some more together, like, no, actually this is a planet. You keep putting more and more, and then you will get a bigger and bigger picture, a clearer picture. But let's say somebody keeps dumping pieces on you over and over again. Are you ever going to get the full picture? No. That's what science is doing. They're getting new pieces. They're saying, look, what we said before was incorrect. Here's a clearer picture. And they'll keep on doing that. And that's why things change and, well, they say improve, and they're improving, and that's fine. That's good. But when they come and say, give me scientific evidence for God, that's not how science works. Science doesn't deal with morality. Like a scientist, you can't ask a scientist, hey, is it bad or good to kill a person? A scientist can't tell you that. They'll tell you, on a cellular or molecular level what happens. They'll say, these are the causes and effects and reactions. They can't say whether something is good or bad. A scientist can design an atomic bomb, but they can't tell you that it was a good or a bad idea to do that. A scientist can give you technology for cloning, or maybe build a time machine, but they can't tell you ethically, morally, whether it's a good or a bad idea, because that's outside of the realm of science. That's not their job. They have no idea. Science is just about looking at the physical world and experimenting. That's it. When we're talking about God, when we're talking about religion, when we're talking about morality, everything that makes humans what they are, what gives us value. What gives us value is not the fact that we have technology. That's not what gives us value. What makes us different than animals is the fact that we have an intellect and that we have a moral compass. We have the ability to say this is right and this is wrong. If a lion tears a deer to pieces, you can't say, oh my God, that lion is so evil. Nobody says that, right? In fact, people will watch Netflix documentaries about lions doing that all day, right? And nobody says, oh my God, how could you watch something like that? You're so evil. No, it's nature. There's no good or evil there. That's just the way nature works out. Science doesn't talk about that stuff. So when they're saying, hey, prove to me God exists, scientifically, like, look, when we're talking about God, you need to understand we're not talking about some physical being. I know that maybe in movies and TV, they make it seem like it's some guy, some white guy with a long white beard. Like, no, that's not God. God is not Santa Claus, right? And he's not the Christian Jesus either. That's not God. When we're talking about God, we're talking about something immaterial. He's not made of physical parts. He's not made of matter. Science measures matter and deals with energy. God is beyond that stuff. So if you want to talk about that, we can't use science. Now, we can give you pointers. We can give you things which will make you think that probably there is a God. And that's where the first types of proofs come in about God's existence. The first of which is known as the Tediological Argument, which will start if you can recite out. Salawat ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. So, teleological, it's a fancy word. What it means is the argument or proof by design. That's it. And it's very simple. It's what we say it's history, it's in our nature. When you and I, if we go out somewhere, if let's say we go to some random desert in the middle of Phoenix, right, where there's no houses or anything. We go walking or hiking, well I don't go hiking, I don't want to. But let's say we go out a couple miles, there's just empty desert, barren land. And in the middle of nowhere, we see some mansion. It's dilapidated, but we see some foundation building, doors, rooms, screws and bolts and things like that. Naturally, we're like, oh, somebody must have built a house here. Because we know that these things don't put themselves together. We know that they don't come together by themselves. We know that no, somebody put this here. Houses don't build themselves. That's an irrational idea. It's an illogical idea. This is the simplest sort of analogy that our scholars have given. They said, look, we know that there's organization in this world. We know that this world works by cause and effect. There is no chaos in this world. So, I'll give you an example. If I take an apple seed, I plant it in the ground, what is it going to grow into?
Apple tree.
An apple tree, right? Has it ever happened ever in history where somebody planted an apple seed and like an M1 Abrams tank came out? Or you got pizza out of it? Or, I don't know, a computer? No, that doesn't happen. Because we work by laws of cause and effect. You can't get anything except apples from an apple seed. You're not guaranteed a good apple, but that's the only thing that possibly could come from it. There's only some possibility of what's going to happen there. We don't have chaos in this world. We don't have spontaneous combustion and things like that. Or spontaneous things popping into existence. That doesn't happen. Things have cause and effect. So we say, hey, scientists, I understand that you're having trouble thinking scientifically about God existing. So, in science, can you do experiments? Can you prove anything to be scientifically true if there was no such thing as cause and effect? In any science, chemistry, biology, quantum physics, everything works by cause and effect, right? You have a cause and it leads to an effect. If you don't have that system, there's no science anymore. Right? That's the whole idea about experimentation. Going back to the coin flip one. the reason is because I know that if I flip, it's going to, do gravity and velocity, all the other, different factors there from your physics. It'll come back down and it has to land on something. Nobody's going to say that, yeah, when you flick it, it's going to go flying in the air or it's going to turn into a flower. Nobody has that idea in their mind. Because we all have this belief in cause and effect. How many have ever seen Tenet, by the way? Christopher Nolan's kind of latest movie, Tenet, came out a couple years ago. So in there, Robert Pattinson has a lot of interesting dialogue there, but they talk about the whole idea of free will and cause and effect. And that itself, believing in cause and effect, is a belief system too. You can ask a scientist, like, hey, you're saying that the only thing that we believe is something we can experiment on, right, that I can see and taste and touch and smell, and experiment on, they can attest to? Okay, prove to me that cause and effect exists. Show me in a test tube, under a microscope, that there's something called cause and effect. They'll never be able to do it. Because cause and effect is not a material thing. It's a metaphysical idea. It's an immaterial idea. You can't prove cause and effect like that. That's not how cause and effect works. And they need cause and effect in order for science to work. That's the whole point. So look, if you think about that, again, we're not saying 100%, but does it make sense for cause and effect and organization and design to be in all of this universe, as far as we understand, and for that to come about randomly, when we've never seen anything random like this before? One of the responses that some give is evolution, which inshallah one of these nights we'll try to talk about. Some responses that they've given. But initially they say, look, if you believe in cause and effect, you believe that A leads to B, leads to C, leads to D, etc. This is an organized system. And in every other part of our life, any other way that we look at things, this is showing that somebody was behind this. Or what we call in Arabic, a nazim, an organizer, a designer. So in Arabic, this is known as burhan al-nazim, or dalil al-nazim. The proof or argument that this world is organized and designed. And every experience that we have in life, even rationally speaking, or going by mathematical probability, anytime we see something complex and beautiful, we know, or at least without a shadow of a doubt, assume that there is somebody behind it. Never have we ever assumed that, no, this has happened out of nowhere, and this is random. Let me give you an analogy just to make sure that it's understood. If you can recite Salawat ala Muhammad wa
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
Let's say, I know the kids are coloring and everything. Let's say I decide to go bring them some paint. So I've got a tray with me, and let's say I've got like 2 or 3 different colors, right? Yellow, red, and blue. So I'm walking with this tray of paint, these 3 colors, towards the kids' area, and on the way there, I trip, I fall, and these 3 colors spill on the floor. Now, as they spill, let's say it makes some sort of design and shape on the floor, right? Like something that looks like a smiley face. Is that something that's possible? It could happen. No, it could happen, right?
Yeah.
It might. You spill something, sometimes it makes a shape, right? It looks like something, like it reminds you of something. Yeah, maybe it makes a circle over a face. Like, oh yeah, that's interesting. What a coincidence, right? You might say. Okay. So then I'm like, okay. So I clean it up, I go back, I refill the paint, and then you know what? I don't think 3 colors is enough. Let me go add a couple more. So I add green and purple and pink and a couple other ones. So I go back to the kids' room. And then I trip again, and I fall. And then all the paint spills again. And over there, it's now a few different types of designs. It's like almost like a house, and a sun, and like grass, and the sky. Like, whoa. That's really, really interesting that it came out like that. Like, just picture that was made from an accident. Is that possible? Kind of. It might happen. It's not irrational. Something like that might happen. So, okay, fine. Sorry, I clean it up again. I go back. Now, I decide, you know what, I think I need a lot more colors. So I decided to get, let's say 1, maybe 2 billion colors, right? Yeah, a lot of colors. I have big arms, so I can put all these on a tray. And because there's something wrong with me, I keep tripping, I end up tripping too. Now when I trip and I fall, 1 picture is made. And from that picture, it makes another picture. And from that picture, another one gets made. And more pictures keep getting made just from my 1 spill. And it keeps going on infinitely. How likely is something like that? No. That's not rationally possible. So, okay. If that's the case, then we just think about the universe as it exists right now. That as far as most would say, there are about 1 to 2 billion unique species of living things right now. Oh, even if you want to believe in Darwinian evolution, even if we take that as a process that works, fine. We're saying all of these unique species of living creatures has all come accidentally And all the things that were needed from, let's say, the Big Bang up until now for our life to exist, are you saying all of that was a result of some accident? It's really, really unlikely. If I can't spill and make all these things, how can you say that all of this light can come into existence, all this complexity? It's not a rational idea at all. So what we say off the bat is that, look, science is not going against religious belief. Science is showing that, look, the design and cause and effect that you see in the world does not disprove God. It's indicating that there's probably a designer here. There's probably somebody in control. Otherwise, how would it work out? Sure, you have a question? Yeah, go ahead.
Are you saying it is irrational to believe that life is unlikely to occur in a universe operating with this sorts of laws of physics? Is it irrational to believe that it's unlikely life in this universe?
In this universe?
Yes.
So it would be, we're going by one, this human experience. So far, we haven't seen anything spontaneously generated, right? Everything's been a result of cause and effect, right?
I would guess so.
Sorry?
I would guess so, yeah.
Yeah, meaning like
Let's assume.
from the original, let's say, forces that came from the Big Bang. Everything's been a product from that. It's not like we have some brand new thing that popped into existence and that's what changed things on. There's initial forces and particles and everything that was there in the beginning. That's what's led to creation of stars and planets. You start with the initial strong nuclear force, weak nuclear force. From there, from the expansion, that's what we get what we have right now. Right? You get water forming on this planet. From there, single cellular organism, and that starts going. So all of that information was within each and every step. There was no new thing that popped in. All the information was there, but over time it started to emerge. It didn't just pop in, it emerged slowly. Are you following me or no?
I'm assuming, I'm taking the assumptions you're making that
Okay.
there is no virtual particles popping into existence. I'm gonna brush over the details, so
Sure.
I'm following you.
Okay, and I appreciate
Yes.
that. Okay. So, because that's the way that science has assumed everything so far, otherwise science wouldn't have worked out. Based on human experience from that, based on the scientific experiment and the methodology that's been used, that's how science is performed, they're saying, look, we don't have spontaneous generation as a piece of evidence. We've never witnessed it.
What do you mean spontaneous generation? What is being generated?
Anything. There's nothing that spontaneously has come in. Like right now, there's nothing that pops in
Why
right
does
now.
anything need to be spontaneously generated for life to come into existence?
So there's two options, right? One is something just popping right here. If a human being just popped in, that would be spontaneous, right? The normal system is that a human being has grown up from as a fetus. That fetus is as a result of implantation, conception from a male and female, sexual reproduction, which is an evolution from asexual reproduction. So these are all leading up to this point. It's not that it just popped in like that. It's two different ways. It's either through stages or it's random as immediately. That's what I'm saying. There's two different options like that.
I don't get how this conflicts with the atheistic view, or how is this even irrational?
So what we're saying is this, that the overlying evidence right now for how we believe in how things work, in science itself, outside of God and all that stuff, is things require a process. Things don't just pop up by themselves. They don't create themselves or make themselves, they just come from nothingness. There's a process behind everything. So the normal, that's why we gave the analogy of just finding a random mansion in the middle of the desert. Nobody would rationally assume that this created itself, the bricks or the pieces of wood or the nails screw themselves and tighten themselves, etc. Nobody said, look, these are complex processes. Complex processes are a result of cause and effect. Based on that idea, the most rational assumption to make is in somebody putting this stuff together, not in randomization. Randomization is the exception to the rule. It's not the rule, because there is no rule of randomization. There's nothing that is randomization in this universe yet, as we've observed. There's nothing called spontaneous generation. We've never seen anything like that.
Why is there a need for spontaneous generation or any randomness? Why can't the universe be deterministic and life comes across by the laws of physics, however unlikely it is? What's wrong
We're
with that?
fine with that. What we're saying is that as long as you believe that things are determined, that there's a system of cause and effect, what we're saying is anytime you see that there are quote-unquote rules set in place, like there's no chaos in the world, right?
Yes, it follows such regularities as the laws of physics, yes.
Yeah, so for example, in cosmology, or strongly it comes the Cosmological Principle, that we believe, inshallah, if we ever talk about the Big Bang, we'll get to that, in order for somebody to believe the Big Bang is possible, they have to believe in the cosmological principle. The cosmological principle states that the universe plays fairly with us when we're examining, no matter where it is.
Yes, it's homogeneous.
Right? So that means, in other words, it's like if we were to all play soccer, we're assuming that everybody's going to play by the same rules. Right? Everybody who's playing, they can't run out of bounds, they can't do this. There's a set of rules that everybody's playing by. Normally, when we're doing that, the assumption is somebody's put rules together. It's not like we all just magically, intuitively figured out all the rules. And usually there's some referee or somebody making sure the rules are being followed too. So that's the way normally our life has been so far. Now, is there a point 0.0000 whatever? The actual astronomical number I think is 10 to the whatever 1 and whatever. It's a huge, huge number, right? Of one statistical anomaly off, and there is no universe anymore. There is no life, for example. So based on that sort of scientific approach, then there is no universe, no life. There's nothing. So what we have here is a result of statistical anomalies, if you want to put it that way, of every single event, one after another, every single domino falling in order for this to take place. So look, this is a simple, clear way of understanding that every other place we've seen this in life, we've understood that somebody was behind that. We've never seen this happen randomly. Okay, so this is not the only one, but this is one way that some people approach it. So if you want to go through details, we can go through details afterwards if you want to, inshallah.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So the Dalil al-Nazm, or this proof of design, has been the one that's been used throughout time by most people. And that's how most of us have been taught too, right? Like, look out in the world, how beautiful and organized and everything it is. That's how most people believe. But are there issues with this proof? Yeah, there are issues, definitely. For example, somebody could even say, the brother brought up some good points. Those are normally some of the responses that are given. Well, that doesn't 100% prove that there's a God. Yeah, that's true. Or even if it does prove that there is a God, you're not disproving that there's 100 gods or 1,000 gods. What if there's a bunch of gods that all have been, designing different laws of the universe? That's also a possibility. You didn't answer that question through this proof of, organization. Well, that's true too. So normally throughout history, this proof of organization and design was not normally used to prove monotheism in the way that we understand it. It was used as just, this is the simple, intuitive way that we understand that God exists, that's it. But when philosophers actually spoke with others who dealt with laws of cause and effect, or wanted to debate them in terms of philosophical or dialectic reasoning, we call it, or Aristotelian logic, then they utilized another type of proof. And this is something known as Burhan, Imkan, and Wujud. That there's this proof that we're going to look at the idea of cause and effect or existence itself. From there, we can show you with 100% rational certainty that this whole reality, not just this universe, anything that is real, that must exist, there has to be an all-powerful existing force behind it. And that's what we're going to discuss tomorrow night, inshallah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So I said I wanted to allow time for Q&A. I'm going to take the brothers' questions and I consider that part of the Q&A. So I'm going to just move on, inshallah, if that's okay with you. But again, if you have questions, just like the brother did, in the middle of them you can ask as well. We don't have to wait till the end. If there's a point that's confusing, that doesn't make sense, or you feel is incorrect, you can, I have no problem, interrupt, put your hand up, or just scream it out, whatever, and just say it, and then we'll try to answer it while we're here, inshallah, because when it's fresh in the middle of the point, I think it'll be better off that we do that, right? One more salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So every night also, we want to make sure that we're remembering the Shuhada of Karbala and just reciting a bit of the Maqdad and the Masa'ib for different Shuhada and different personalities that were there and gave their lives for Islam. Imam Hussein, after leaving Medina and making his way to Makkah, after leaving Makkah, having been given these letters from the people of Kufa, right? The people of Kufa said, Imam, we will support you, we will defend you, we will protect you. Come to Kufa. Start your revolution here. So he made his way there. And we remembered how last night he sent Muslim ibn Aqil, his cousin, first. But unfortunately, the people betrayed Muslim. And when Imam had heard word of this, then of course he knew that this is going to be a difficult journey now. More difficult than he had already known. when he was just at the outskirts of Kufa, this is when one of the different, there's many different battalions that Umar ibn Sa'd had sent out. There's many different, smaller forces, each of them with their own commander, with a few thousand forces. They would go out and they would have different jobs. So, for example, we know Shimr. Shimr had his own command of about 2,000-3,000 forces, so he would go out. We also know the famous commander of Hur, Ibn Yazid al-Riyah. He was also one of these commanders in the army of Umar ibn Sa'd, sent out and dispatched by Ibn Ziyad from Kufa. Hur's orders were to go and stop Imam Hussein before he reaches Kufa. Because the fear was that, look, we know that Muslims' revolution was unsuccessful, but if Imam Hussein reaches Kufa, he still might change people's hearts. Muslim coming is one thing, but Imam Hussein, he may change people's hearts. He may affect them differently. So Ibn Ziyad and the governor of Kufa at that point said, no, Hur, take some forces, go out and stop Imam Hussein from coming to Kufa. So right outside of Kufa, Hur meets the army of the Imam. What's interesting is on that journey, apparently they had some difficulties, the army of Hur. And when they had met Imam Hussein's army, the soldiers had run out of water. Because they had lost, there was some difficulties, they had no water left. Imam Hussein had ordered his soldiers, everybody that was with him, to give them some water. Knowing full well this is an enemy commander that's coming in, he gave them water. Foreshadowing what was going to come in Karbala. When Hur now is with Imam, they're having a dialogue. Salah time comes, right? It's namaz time. Hur, unlike all the other individuals who were there in Karbala, Hur was not an evil person in the way that kind of we think about the other people. Hur was a great individual, but for whatever reason, he was stuck on the wrong side. Wrong place, wrong time. Or in this case, we'd say he was at the right place at the right time. Salah time comes. Imam Hussein says, okay, Hur, it's Salah time. You can go lead your soldiers in Salah, and I'll lead my soldiers in Salah. What does Hur say? You figure they're enemies, right? So why would they pray with each other? Hur says, no, I'm going to pray behind you. You're the grandson of the Prophet. Of course I'm going to pray behind you. So he orders his soldiers, and everybody pray behind Imam Hussein. So this is actually the character of Hur. Even though he's coming to stop and eventually fight Imam Hussein, he has this level of akhlaq. He had some ma'rifah, some deep established iman. But somewhere along the way, you get pushed away and deviated. But then finally, now Imam Hussein says, look, I need to be on my way, I'm headed towards Kufa. Now Hur stops him. He says, no, I can't let you go. And there's a bit of a back and forth. Basically, Hur comes in front of the Imam and does not let him go forward. And the Imam replies to him with very harsh words. Normally when we think of the Ahlul Bayt, we think of always loving, always kind. But Imam Hussein, he says very, very harsh words to Hur. And kind of the literal Arabic, he's telling him, may your mother weep over you. That's what he says to Hur. But in sort of modern language, he's saying, Hur, it's better if you die, and that your mother cried that you died, because it's better that you're not alive. That's what he says to Hur. Very harsh. Now, if somebody said something like that to us, we would respond the same exact way. So you insult me, I'll insult you too. But Hur, because of the ma'rifah that he had, the iman that he had, he says, if your mother was anyone other than Fatima, then I would respond back to you the same way. But what can I say? You are the son of Fatima. How can I talk back to you like this? You see, there was a softness in his heart. There was purity in his heart. And when we see finally, on the day of Ashura, when the forces are facing one another, Hur is pacing back and forth in the battlefield. And there's a strange look on his face. And some of the other soldiers, the ones that were close to him, they come up to him and say, Hur, if somebody asked me who was the bravest individual in the army, I would give your name. Now I see you walking back and forth, stressed out, crying. I don't understand. Why are you afraid of the army? What is going on? He says, no, it's not fear that you think. It's not that. There's conflict in my heart. I see myself between heaven and hell, and I don't know what to do. And this person that asked Hur this said, I don't understand. Hur said, come with me, let me show you. Hur went, he said, let's come closer to the tents of Hussein, I want you to hear something. So he brings this other soldier closer to the tents of the Ahlul Bayt, And he says, do you hear this? Do you hear this? And this person says, yes. He said, what do you hear? He said, I hear the crying of children saying, Al-Atash, Al-Atash. They're crying because they have no water. They're crying because they're thirsty. So Khor says, this is what I've been thinking about since we've arrived here. That I am the one who brought these children here. I am the one who brought these women over here and forced them to come to Karbala. And now they're without water, without food, they have nothing. I'm the one who forced them to come over here. And I know that if I fight them, then I go to hell. I need to go and make a decision to fight alongside Imam Hussein. I can't stay here anymore. But how can I come back to Imam Hussein in such a condition when I'm the one who brought him like this? So Khor said, they say Khor asked his servant to blindfold him, to tie his hands together, and Khor then made his way closer to Imam Hussein's camp. He told his servant that I want to come to Hussein like a prisoner because I don't deserve to come to him like a free person. He comes closer to Imam Hussein. When he finally comes to the camp, and he comes inside, the narration says he fell off his horse and he came crawling to Imam Hussein. He says, Ya Rasulullah, will you forgive me for bringing you over here? He says, I am the reason why your children are thirsty and crying. I am the reason why your women are thirsty and crying. I am the reason why this heat is affecting all of your family. I am the reason why some of these people will not be able to see their family and ever go back home again. Will you ever forgive me? And Hussein is, of course, the manifestation of Ghafur and Rahim. He's the manifestation of forgiveness. He says, Antal Maghfur. Of course, we forgive you, Khor. And when Khor hears this, he's happy. Imam Hussein kisses his forehead. He unties the blindfold. He unties him. But Khor says, I need to, now that I've been forgiven, I need to go get permission from your women as well and see if they've forgiven me. So Khor then goes to the women and he says, do you forgive me for having you and causing you to come over here? And the women say, if Hussein has forgiven you, then we forgive you as well. And then finally they say that Khor then said, I have to speak to one other person. He said, let me speak to Zainab bint Ali. Let me speak to Zainab. When Zainab comes out, he says, Ya bint Ali. He says, I am the cause for you to be over here. Will you forgive me? He says, Khor, why are you asking this? My brother has forgiven you. All of us have forgiven you. Why are you asking? He says, yes, everyone has forgiven me, but I have one special request from you specifically. What is your request? He says, I request that on Yawm al-Qiyamah, on the day of judgment, when we are all raised up, when you go and see your mother Fatima, don't complain to Fatima about what I did. Don't tell Fatima that I'm the reason that her children were thirsty. لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره صلوات على محمد وآل محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين
समंदर का, पानी सात समंदर का, अब शर्म से पानी पानी है, मातम कर लो हुस्न का लो, दुनिया पानी है, मातम कर लो हुस्न का लो, दुनिया पानी है। साल 18 ज़ैनब ने नाज़ों से जिसको पाला था, साल 18 ज़ैनब ने नाज़ों से जिसको पाला था, जिसको था मालूम कि उसने किसको था मालूम कि उस जिगर पे बर्छी खानी है, मातम कर लो हुस्न का लो, दुनिया पानी है, मातम कर लो हुस्न का लो, दुनिया पानी है। साल 18 ज़ैनब ने नाज़ों से जिसको पाला था, जिसको था मालूम कि उसने जिगर पे बर्छी खानी है, मातम कर लो हुस्न का लो, दुनिया पानी है, मातम कर लो हुस्न का लो, दुनिया पानी है। जब से दिन आशूर का गुज़रा हम शबीर को रोते हैं, जब से दिन आशूर का गुज़रा हम शबीर को रोते हैं, मातम की तारीफ न पूछो जब ये बात पुरानी है, मातम कर लो हुस्न का लो, दुनिया पानी है, मातम कर लो हुस्न का लो, दुनिया पानी है। प्यास हुसैन की याद आती है, मुल्कों फिरता है, पानी सात समंदर का, पानी सात समंदर का, अब शर्म से पानी पानी है, तुम कर लो हुस्न का लो, दुनिया पानी है, मातम कर लो हुस्न का लो, दुनिया पानी है।
ذکر آخر من که مانند نی در نوایم عاشقم عاشق کربلایم، من که مانند نی در نوایم عاشقم عاشق کربلایم. بر محمد آل محمد صلوات. من که مانند نی در نوایم عاشقم عاشق کربلایم، من که مانند نی در نوایم عاشقم عاشق کربلایم، عاشقم عاشق کربلایم، من که مانند نی عاشقم عاشق کربلایم، عاشقم عاشق کربلایم، روز و شب در غم و شور و شینم عاشق کربلای حسینم، عاشق کربلای حسینم، من که مانند نی عاشقم عاشق کربلایم، عاشقم عاشق کربلایم. غم و شور و شیم، عاشق کربلای حسینم، عاشق کربلای حسینم. من که مانند نی در نهایم، عاشقم عاشق کربلایم، عاشقم عاشق کربلایم. بلبلا سا کنم نغمه خوانی، تا که باشد چنین در صدایم، تا که باشد چنین در صدایم. یا حسین جز تو شاهی ندارم، جز تو شاه پناهی ندارم، جز تو شاه پناهی ندارم. من که مانند نی در نوایم، عاشقم عاشق کربلایم، عاشقم عاشق کربلایم. عاشقم من گناهی ندارم، حق بود شاهد مدعایم، حق بود شاهد مدعایم. یا حسین ای عزیزی پیامبر، زاده عصمت پاک داور، زاده عصمت پاک داور. من که مانند نی در نوایم، عاشقم عاشق کربلایم، عاشقم عاشق کربلایم. تا فدای وفای تو گردم، در رسایت سخن سرایم، در رسایت سخن سرایم. گشتم تا به مهر تو پایبند، گر جدا گرددم بند و از بند، گر جدا گرددم بند از بند. من که مانند نی در نوایم، عاشقم عاشق کربلایم، عاشقم عاشق کربلایم. زیب عرش خدا پور حیم، با غم و عشق تو آشنایم. من چو مجنون صحرا نهفتم، آشنا با غم و رنج و دردم، آشنا با غم و رنج و دردم. من که مانند نی در نوایم، عاشقم عاشق کربلایم، عاشقم عاشق کربلایم. حق به محشر چو خواهد حسابم، در سوالش بود این جوابم، در سوالش بود این جوابم. ذاکری زادهی بوترامم، مرثیت خوان آب عبایم، مرثیت خوان آب عبایم. من که مانند نی در نوایم، عاشقم عاشق کربلایم، عاشقم عاشق کربلایم. روز و شب در غم و شور و شیم، عاشق کربلای حسینم. روز و شب در غم و شور و شیم، عاشق کربلای حسینم، عاشق کربلای حسینم. من که مانند نی در نوایم، عاشقم عاشق کربلایم، عاشقم عاشق کربلایم. عاشقم من گناهی ندارم، حق بود شاهد مدعایم، حق بود شاهد مدعایم. یا حسین ای عزیزی پیامبر، زاده
به عرش خدا پور حیدر با غم و عشق تو آشنایم با غم و عشق تو آشنایم من چو مجنون و صحرا نبردم آشنا با غم و رنج و دردم آشنا با غم و رنج و دردم که مانند نی در نوایم عاشقم عاشق کربلایم عاشقم عاشق کربلایم من که مانند نی در نوایم عاشقم عاشق کربلایم عاشقم عاشق کربلایم بلبلا سا کنم نغمه خوانی تا که باشد تنین در صدایم تا که باشد تنین در صدایم یا حسین جست و شاهی ندارم جست و شاه و پناهی ندارم جست و شاه و پناهی ندارم من که مانند عاشقم عاشق کربلایم عاشقم عاشق کربلایم مرغ دل ما زند پر به هوایت حسین قبله عالم شدم کرب و بلایت حسین منم گدایت حسین منم گدایت حسین کن نظری از کرم به این گدایت حسین 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 جان حسین 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 جان حسین مرغ دلی ما زند پر به هوایت حسین مرغ دلی ما زند پر به هوایت حسین قبله عالم شده کرب و بلایت حسین منم گدایت حسین منم گدایت حسین کن نظری از کرم به این گدایت حسین 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 جان حسین 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 جان حسین 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 جان حسین 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 جان حسین مرغ دلی ما زند پر به هوایت حسین مرغ دلی ما زند پر به هوایت حسین قبله عالم شده کرب و بلایت حسین منم گدایت حسین منم گدایت حسین چون نظری از کرم به این گدایت حسین چون نظری از کرم به این گدایت حسین 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 یا حسین 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 یا حسین 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 یا حسین 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 یا حسین چرا فتادی چنین چرا فتادی چنین به خاک زهرا حسین غرق خون بکفن به این گدایت حسین سوخته از تشنگی سوخته از تشنگی تمام جانت حسین تشنه چنین ندیده در لب دریا حسین تشنه چنین ندیده در لب دریا حسین 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 جان حسین 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 جان حسین 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 یا 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 حسین ای پسری فاطمه ای پسری فاطمه چرا تو بیاوری ای پسری فاطمه چرا تو بیاوری تو حجتی کردگار تو حجتی کردگار وسیع پیغمبری تو شاهی بینوایی تو شاهی بینوایی خدا را مظهری در رای حق دادنی هستی خود را حسین در رای حق دادنی هستی خود را حسین 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 یا حسین 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 یا حسین 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 یا حسین 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 یا حسین گریه و مظلومیت پیغمبران کردند گریه و مظلومیت پیامبران کردند ناله ز داغ غمت پیر و جوان کردند ناله ز داغ غمت پیر و جوان کردند اشک ز داغ از دیدگان السلام عليك يا رسول الله يا خاتم النبيين السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين يا سيد المسيحيين السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدتي نساء العالمين السلام عليك يا أبا محمد الحسن بن علي أيها الزكي الناصح الأمين السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين بن علي أيها الغريب المظلوم الشهيد بكربلاء السلام عليكم يا أصحاب الحسين السلام عليكم يا أنصار الحسين السلام عليكم يا أزواج الحسين السلام عليكم يا ذريات الحسين السلام عليك يا أخت الحسين زينب بنت أمير المؤمنين السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين السلام عليكم يا أئمة الهدى يا علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى الرضا الغريب الغرباء ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب العصر والزمان السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان الأمان 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 من فتن الزمان سيدي عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك واجعلنا من أنصاره وعوانه والمستشهدين بين يديك ورحمة الله وبركاته.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.